Welcome back to Inspiring Entrepreneurs. I'm Katie McNair from Strathclyde Inspire, and today we're taking on a belief that holds far too many students back, that your degree dictates your destiny. It absolutely does not. Even though not all graduates work in their exact field, 73% of UK graduates say that going to university got them the job they wanted, or at least enabled them to get a job that they wanted, showing the value of transferable skills. This episode is all about breaking assumptions and expanding possibilities, because you can do far more with your degree than you think. And with me today, I have two guests who are going to show you exactly how. Kayla Megan Burns is a Biomedical Science graduate turned tech founder, whose journey spans student leadership during the pandemic, writing empowering children's books, and building AI-enabled software after interviewing 88 organisations around the world. Their story is a masterclass in refusing the boxes that people try to put you in. And Dr Marc Reid is a chemist, author, and UKRI Future Leaders Fellow, whose work spans physical organic chemistry, computer vision, virtual reality, process safety, and the psychology of imposter syndrome. If you've ever questioned whether you belong in a room, Marc literally wrote the book on it, and it's called You Are Not a Fraud. Today, we're going to explore together how your degree can open more doors than you ever knew existed. So let's get started. So, Kayla and Marc, welcome.
Thank you.
It would be great if we could have some quick introductions about what you do today and what's one part of your journey that perhaps your lecturers wouldn't have predicted. Kayla, if we start with you.
I think if my lecturers predicted any of my journey, I would be going back to them now and asking for lottery numbers. I started in biomedical science, and right now I'm actually working in HCI, so human computer interaction. Things like wearable tech and the future of media. So right now the AI era is well and truly here, but it's looking at how we're going to interact with that. Right now we have LLMs and chatbots and things like that. We're all familiar with Claude and GPT and whatnot. But what does that look like for how we produce and consume media going forward? And crucially, can that be ethical and can it be safe? Because right now we have screens and screen addiction. With AI, with the dawn of ambient computing, that can become much worse, much more all-consuming and much more dangerous. But also, it could be much more adaptive, which is where I'm really interested in, and that's where I'm situated right now. So considering I started with a biomedical science background and no computer science and things like that, if my lecturers had come out with any of that as my direction, never mind all of the stuff that's happened in between, yeah, I think I would have been pretty shocked, and I definitely wouldn't have believed them.
How about you, Marc? Has it been quite as wide a journey into where you are now?
Well, I definitely resonate with some screen addiction and doom scrolling from time to time, so overcoming that has been one thing. But in terms of my path to now, what people would have predicted and not, it has been one story of contradictions, I would say. So on paper, no violin playing for me. I've been the straight A student and obsessed with being that. Not to sound immodest about it, but there's a difference between doing well in exams and doing well in real life. But these are the things that led me down what looks like a very linear path to begin with. Did well at school, did well at university, studied chemistry, then went from chemistry to a PhD in chemistry, then from a PhD to a postdoc, and then from a postdoc to failing multiple times to get into academia, and eventually now having a day job as a senior lecturer at the university. So that's been my straight path. The thing that wouldn't have been predicted has been the number of times I, in the past, felt almost embarrassed to want to do academia and business at the same time. And so multiple steps along that journey have been, I can see you're also interested in this, but it might be a distraction from that. Oh, you're going in to do this next thing next. Don't spread yourself too thin. Just stick to that one thing that's on that linear path that you seem to be doing well at. So it's been a mental wrestle to make sure that not only can I do it, but show others that you can have a balance. You needn't have all your eggs in one basket. And there's a great many people in the population for whom having all their eggs in one basket is just deeply boring and not making the best of that person. So very much on the fence between academic life and entrepreneurial life.
Well, there's the deeply boring, and then there's the maybe not even that smart in terms of the future landscape. Sometimes it's useful to have more than one basket on the go because you never know how things are going to change. And with things changing so fast, with
Yes,
AI really accelerating the speed of change, it seems quite useful now to maybe be able to take those ideas that seemed like they weren't to do with what you were studying and put some passion into them on the side. So, Kayla, your path, it spans science, leadership, writing, and tech. When did you first realize that your degree could open up spaces that you didn't necessarily imagine?
So I think what's really important for me actually is that I was a first gen student. But not only was I a first gen student, I was the first person in my family to stay in school past the age of 16. So it was being in university alone was like oh my gosh, this is a much bigger world than I ever imagined before. And there's so much more opportunity here than I could have ever even began to imagine. And I remember having the trouble of trying to pick out what I wanted to study at uni. And it was but there's so many options. There's so many things I've never even heard of. And I became this student where it's like I had I had UCAS open, I had every prospectus, I was looking down. I had done so many tests to try and figure out what I was good at and what I should go and do because I was the exact same. I was the traditional really good student, straight A's, A stars all the time, smashing that out. And so I could have chosen a multitude of routes. And ironically, there was one test that was facilitated through my school that was kind of an aptitude test that said about, what you should do and help you pick your course and whatnot. And it came back and said that I should be a CEO. I had never heard of a CEO before. I didn't know what that was, and I had to Google what that was and what that meant. And whenever I Googled it, I distinctly remember reading what a CEO was, but that's not a real job. That's not a real thing that I can go and do. That's ridiculous. What will I do? Biomedical science. That's a real thing. It was I don't have the stomach for medicine, but this is close enough. This is the thing, came to this conclusion of biomed. And from the moment I set foot on campus at Strathclyde, this was so much of a bigger opportunity than I think was afforded to most of my family beforehand. I realized what a privilege it was to be here. And so just this in itself, just getting to complete a degree was the opportunity in itself for me. So I came here and I did everything I possibly could, from wakeboarding to big band to band society to kayaking, you name it, and I was in it. And tried everything that I possibly could. Wound up in student politics and literally anything. Freshers fairs, they come around and go, oh, you should try this. You might be good at this. I just said yes to all of them. And every opportunity. And that was just getting to be here and get to do a degree was definitely that moment for me. And biomed was chosen because I'm good at science and it was a smart thing to do. It was actually getting here and seeing actually all of these people are doing all of these different things, some of which I've never even heard of. And there's the opportunities to do even and to try things out that I never heard of. I wound up coming third in Scottish student sport for fencing. Where does that come from? And so, just literally arriving from, especially I think moving from a rural community into a big university campus in a big city, that in itself was the big moment for me. And my degree was definitely the portal to get me there. Just coming to university was the portal for all of that in the very first place.
I think that's really interesting. We talk about kind of this idea of having an entrepreneurial mindset and enabling you to find success, whatever that might be. And that might be starting a business, but it absolutely does not have to be. And one of the skills we talk about in it is to do with forward thinking and trying to figure out where it is you're trying to get to so that you can start to build a path. But it sounds like for you, university was actually a chance to try many, many paths. And maybe that would then enable you to come to that moment where you started to do the forward thinking.
100%. I remember for student politics, at this stage, I was in my second year at university and I was stopped in the street by someone in the Students' Union who went, nominations are open. You'd actually be really good at that. And you can sense a theme here because my answer was, all right, I'll give it a go. And I was the youngest and by far the least experienced person running for a highly contested role. And I did just look at it and go, I'll give it a go. It'll be a learning experience. Why not? And yeah, thank goodness I did. Like, thank goodness I did, because that for me was also, there was the moment of coming to university and that being the big door in itself. And then from that students' union role, I did win it. I was shocked. They called my name and I wasn't even really paying attention because I really didn't think that I'd got it. One of my friends had to usher me up and drag me over and go, oh no, that was your name called. You need to go. And it was like, right. And again, that was a big path for me. That was a big moment, a big opportunity, because you set your own policies. You set your own agenda for what you're going to achieve. And that really gave me the opportunity to test out things where it's like, actually, I'm really interested in climate change. I'm really passionate about climate change. I've never had the opportunity to do much about that before, but I'd like to, so why not? And that really let me test different things about, I'm interested in this. I'd like to give it a go. And thankfully, I had an amazing, supportive CEO as well, Manish Joshi, who did just sit me down and go, well, what do you like? What would you like to try? And yeah, again, just that, having that opportunity to sit down and go, well, I like these things. You know, away from the traditional school path of, yeah, I need to go and I need to get my A's and I need to do these things. It was actually, I like this and I want to give it a go. No risk, no, like, let's go for it. And getting to do that was such an enormous privilege, because it did let me find out what I liked and what I was good at for the very first time. And oh my gosh, there isn't the space for that. There isn't the space for that in the typical funnel. And yeah, again, those student union roles, that was the first time I'd had that space, and it was incredible, because I never would have considered entrepreneurship, running my own business. It was you do well in school, you go to university, you get a degree, and you get a good job resulting from your degree, and that's the path. And yeah, what an amazing time. I think every young person should take that opportunity while they're here and go, what can I try? What can I do?
Yeah.
Because it's only through that you actually find what you're good at.
Yeah. And so, Marc, your career has blended chemistry with VR, psychology, innovation, and also writing. When did you first sense that your degree was more of a launch pad than a lane?
Well, there were a lot of clues early on, but what jumps into my head is that the picture of the movie that was the penny dropping was probably not until I started my first academic role. And it was beyond, here's your PhD, you've got that project, do your best you can with it, you're going to write this book that's called a thesis. Postdoc, there was a move there to another team, another group of people, a new sense of expertise, but still it was a short time. It was very intensive, and it was, here is the big box to tick, learn these expertise and then try and move on beyond that. But then when I got into the academic chair eventually, I was sitting down with no one else around me in my own office in front of a lonely little laptop. And all of a sudden had the opportunity to apply for this bit of money or that bit of money. And to Kayla's point, there was no one else around you immediately saying, you must do this, you must do that. There's then this blank canvas in front of you. But the timing was important for that as well, because at the time of starting that job, that first academic post, there so happened to be a bit of funding I wanted to go for within about 4 to 6 weeks of me sitting down. So it was out the traps right away. But it was the first time I then started toying with ideas of doing stuff that was nothing to do with my PhD, almost nothing to do with my postdoc, and everything to do with what looked very weird to people and working in health and safety in broadest terms. And that for me was a journey into studying how you could make safety training better for chemical industries, where if something goes wrong, it goes wrong on a massive scale. But at the same time, it was a sort of almost secret journey to infuse in my career an ability to talk about my dad having suffered a really huge accident in his life. He was involved in the Piper Alpha incident, and that all got folded into this early stage of my career. But before that, there's no time to think about these things. It doesn't feel like there's a playground to even go with these ideas. But as ever, there was always that thought in the back of the head of, you trained for this other thing, you shouldn't be doing that. And so that was the first time where it was the chance to do it, but it was then the loudest instance of, you're doing X, others think you should be doing Y. So the struggle didn't stop there, but the ability to play started there.
And did people vocalize that they did think you should be doing something different? Or do you think partly that was your own internal view of yourself that you were having to struggle with?
Definitely both. I am very much the sort of person, I say this rather cheesily to my own group, like when there's one finger pointing out, there's always three fingers pointing back. So like a view of the world through personal responsibility is the one that leads to the most power in your own life and career. It's an opinion, but I also think there's good grounding in that, because the one finger pointing out is there's definitely people around who'll say, do this or don't do that. This is a distraction. You know, all of that came, and to be very fair, most of it was incredibly well-meaning. This comes from people who are more senior, more established. For them, when they were playing the game of building their career, the world was this way. This is how they grew and thrived and survived. So it was taking that with, you know, the love with which it was intended, but also putting it through the lens of, well, how have things changed since that opinion was 100% true? So that was always there. But the internal bit, the bit that was more take responsibility for this, was I knew there was lots of voices that were mine and mine alone. They weren't evidence-based. It was just me trying to throw up excuses to myself to think, well, maybe that is a distraction. Maybe that is something I shouldn't bother trying. This bit's going well. Let's not experiment with that other thing over there. So that was always very, very loud, but there were other voices outside as well.
So that actually brings me on really well to my next question, which was, what is one belief about yourself or your abilities that you had to let go of in order to be able to make the progress that you wanted?
I've got a phrase that jumps to mind. We'll see how much it resonates with both of us. Being a one-trick pony. I think this is going to be a theme throughout this conversation. We've talked already about what your degree is, what it enables, maybe what your degree is not. But thinking beyond a degree as a catalyst to explore things, especially the way that Kayla was talking about, there's also a slightly longer term view of, well, once you've done the degree, maybe then there's still this thought process of, I've done this degree, therefore I can get jobs and careers in this field and that field alone. So that's where this one-trick pony thing comes from, because I think people will get a certificate for their degree and think at the same time it's a label for who they are, right? And if you think about it, flip the tables on that and think, what is someone who would employ you actually looking for? Like, what do they see when you hold up the degree certificate? And 9 times out of 10, it's not the words of what the degree are, but it's really the symbol of this person can work to this quality standard that's been checked by many expertise in this place called a university, and it shows that they can do something from beginning to end for about 4 years. Right? That's the really strong signal that's coming out of it. It doesn't mean you have to do that one trick and be the pony who does that one trick for the rest of your life. This then comes back to all the things we've been talking about so far, of experimenting with spreading your wings and almost leaning into the surprise of, I didn't know I could do X. I didn't know that I could go for this role or work with a CEO or learn what a CEO meant, and all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that people can find as well, they might even really think they want to do something and manage to get a foot in the door.
Right.
And then when you're in there, because you've never had that job before, this is your first step into the working world, you look around and you think, oh, hang on a minute. Actually, I don't really like this very much. But you've been through the degree and you've got the grades and you even got the job. And is it okay at that point to say, well, I gave it a go, but actually it's not for me. I think I might move on over to this thing over here, which maybe doesn't have much to do with the thing that I studied, and giving yourself that permission to be able to do that, being able to let go of the effort you've put in thus far and the beliefs that you think other people might hold about you too, can be quite a tough thing to do. I don't know if you had a belief or in yourself or your abilities that you had to let go of in your journey.
Yeah, I think for me, I always had this kind of personal sense of, I've had this immense privilege of getting this far, of going to get a degree and having these types of experiences. It's now my job to provide back. That's what my role, I've been afforded this response. I've been afforded this opportunity, and now I need to give back as a result of that. And for me, the way that I'd positioned that in my own head was, I need to go into like a good firm and get a good job where I'm earning good money. And again, I was in a position of extreme privilege, especially in the current job market, that before I'd even graduated, I had been offered jobs in good firms, not for good money. And that is the current job market. That is the current reality. And there was one situation in particular. I was offered a job with KPMG as a consultant, which is, that's one of the big four. A highly coveted role. That's where a lot of people want to be. And they'd actually really made an effort to kind of get me in. So I was flown over to Belfast to meet some, I think they were directors or something along that line, and have an interview. And all went well. I was told at the end of it, yeah, listen, we'd love to have you. I went, fantastic. And then effectively, between the discussion that followed and the contract that followed on from that, I was told that it was pretty normal to work 80 hours a week, and that was to be expected. I'd need to earn my stripes, and of course, fully respected, of course I need to earn my stripes. I'm driven and keen. Let me earn my stripes. Let me get in there. But I would need to also drop everything else that I was doing. So at the time, I had just written my first children's book, and it was an IBD, very early onset IBD, so a rare children's disease, which was really close to my heart. I have IBD myself, and my brother had just been diagnosed, and that's why I'd written the book. So a real personal cause that would need to be dropped. On top of that, I was convener of Disability Equality Scotland at the time. That would need to be dropped. And I had a media company as well. That would need to be dropped. Anything else that I was doing apart from this role had to be dropped for the grand prize of £24,000 a year. If you work out that salary, taking in the conditions that it's normal to work over 80 hours a week, that's less than minimum wage. And I was just so disillusioned by the whole thing. But this had, up until this point, I was told this was the path. You do well in school, you go to university, you get a good job. If I'm working 80 hours a week, I want it to be, I'll do it for me. Like, I'll do it. Like, I'm far from work shy. I love getting in and about things. I'm really passionate about my work. But if you're going to tell me that I need to spend 80 hours a week to get coffee and sit at a laptop to earn my stripes and not really deliver much, and the pace wasn't going to be what I really wanted, that's really, really, really deflating. But the thing is, to step off that path is petrifying, like really, really petrifying, especially if you don't have things like familial support, because my bills still needed to be paid. I didn't have, you meet a lot of founders, like, if we're being honest, particularly young founders whose parents are paying the rent, or, I remember speaking to someone and they were pre-revenue and all of this year they hadn't got investment yet, and they still a team, they were still doing really well. As it turns out, their parents had invested about 100k in the company, and it's like, okay, these are things I don't have. So if I'm going to go on this journey, how am I going to make that work? And it's really scary. It's really hard to step off that path. So I definitely had to let go of that sense of like being the provider, and above all else, probably a sense of security. And that's definitely a hard decision to make, a scary decision to make, and definitely not something that we should take lightly. So if I'm being honest throughout this, which I think is important, I didn't decline all of the many, many job offers. There was two. There was and walk away. I declined the job offer from one of the big fours, and I did actually develop a relationship with the CEO of another consultancy firm who had started the firm herself. She's absolutely amazing, and she gave me the grace of, I'll give you a year, and we would meet at least yearly, have a little coffee, have a little catch up, and she'd mentor me in business and things like that, and was amazing in saying that, listen, if you ever want a job, it will be here for you. And even whenever I did come to her and go, I want a job, you said it would be here for me, and she went, can you give it 3 more months? Because I think if you hold on, you will make it, but that's going to be hard and scary, but I think you can do it. And this is the thing, going that journey alone is so tough, and surrounding yourself with people that will take that time, will give you that mentorship, and will help you hold the space for things like that is so important. Because I definitely had to let go of that traditional path and that concept of, a good job and a good salary and the right path and all of those things going up. That was really hard. And I know I wouldn't have got through it if it wasn't for good mentorship and amazing people.
I think so many people can struggle with lots of doubts, worries, the feeling that maybe they've done the wrong thing, or maybe they're not good enough. Imposter syndrome can be such an issue. Marc, this is an area that you really have done a lot of work in. Can you explain to us why high achieving people especially can struggle with imposter syndrome?
It's not only that it's high achieving people, is that it happens to high achievers. That is part of the definition of this thing. So yes, this for me started as an itch I needed to scratch, because every move I was making was one where in my head there was a predetermined list of certificates of why I wasn't supposed to be there, and why the real contract was going to get ripped up by my next boss and be found out that I shouldn't be there. So it would be a complete and utter lie to say that I was doing this to make my CV look good, and to say that I had written a book, which I have. But all of it was charity beginning at home. If I didn't figure that sort of stuff out and write a blueprint for myself, there wasn't going to be a next job in science. I was going to hit escape velocity and just get out while I could, because I thought I should. I too did grow up with not many university goers around me, so one of those things about high achievers feeling like imposters can sometimes stem from the fact that you feel like you've had to wear the label of the smart one or the clever one growing up. And simply making that leap into, from school to uni, or from uni to something else, the leap is another trigger of it. But to come back to this idea of why high achievers, show me anyone who has felt this so-called imposter syndrome, who didn't have ambition, didn't have drive, didn't have somewhere they were trying to go next. So this is what I need to do in workshops all the time, is tell people that there's this whole bubble of self-doubt, there's this other bubble of ambition and drive, and this imposter experience is the bit in the middle. It's happening to you specifically because you're trying to trigger a leap to the next thing. So it feels counterintuitive, but it's really, really important, because that distinguishes this whole experience from something like low self-esteem, right? Which can then go into other things that actually do demand more psychological and therapeutic support.
Right.
The imposter experience is not that. It's the best thing that could possibly happen to you whilst you're trying to drive on to that next thing that you want to do.
This is something we talked about in a previous episode, actually, with the chapter leads of Glasgow Fun Nights, and their whole event series is about coming and talking about your failures and talking about the ways that you didn't quite hit the grade, or you missed the mark, or your thing that you set up, it fell down around you. And the reason that can be so helpful is to have other people realize that not everyone has it worked out, and that everyone has that moment of imposter syndrome, but they were actually singing the praises of that moment when you feel like, oh, I don't know actually if I'm good enough to be in this room, or maybe I'm not quite the fit for this, because they were saying in that scenario, probably what you've done is you've put yourself in a place where you can grow, and it's not comfortable. It does feel uncomfortable and like you're not really sure, but that can sometimes be a good sign. Are there mindsets or skills that people can focus on to try and help them get through that discomfort if they find themselves feeling like an imposter in their own career?
Well, I'll professionally bridge this gap with your discussion that you had with Johnny and Dana, who kindly invited me along to one of these nights. So I told a story of failure. But to fast forward to the bit that's, well, what can I as an individual practically do about this? The great thing that the fun nights do, and something that can be a documentable exercise for you, is, well, write down all the things that you would never dare put on a CV. Like, what's all the bullet points that go in between all the things that you might be tempted to call a failure? The jobs you didn't get, the degrees you never got into, the exams that you failed. All of these things are the bits that you want to hide from would-be employers. But if you document that in what can be called a CV of failures, it gives you the shadow of your real CV. But more than that, it gives you this hardcore documentation of the fullness of your effort.
Right.
So the fact that you see that other document is, I live to tell the tale. I gave it a go. It might not have worked out, but here stand I, still here, willing to give the next thing a go. And ultimately, it's all about a little reframing. Most of this stuff that would make you feel like an imposter because you've been rejected multiple times, you will frame that as a failure. But if you twist it a little bit and say, it was the next experiment,
Right.
that's much more palatable to then give a go again. Rather than saying, I don't want to fail again, you're thinking, what could I experiment with next? The behaviour, the thing that you're doing is exactly the same. The words that you're using to describe it are very, very different.
Yes, absolutely. Sounds like resilience, sounds like curiosity in that thing of not taking it as, well, this means something about me. What can it mean moving forward? So curiosity can play a really huge role in shaping unconventional careers. Would you say that curiosity has played a role in shaping your journey so far?
Oh, curiosity supposedly kills the cat, but satisfaction definitely brings it back. Yeah, I'm a painfully curious individual. I love, and that was definitely a trait that I had growing up. I loved asking questions to find out why, and that really irritated a lot of people. But this is the thing. Even so, what I'm doing now with exploring HCI, that came about because I was building an AI startup, focusing on kind of podcast production software, working with tier 1 media companies, so like the likes of your New York Times, your Wall Street Journal, economist companies like that. And they were all amazing. And it was only through the kind of conversations with those companies where I was just asking questions. Why do you do this? Why do you want to do this? What is the goals here? What's the purpose? How much are you spending? How many people are working on this? How much time is going into this? And you do just spend your time asking questions whenever you're building something. And it is the curiosity that drives it. And the first startup that I worked in was driven by 4 non-technical founders.
Right.
And I remember going into this, it was one of my first days, and finding out that they were all non-technical. And I was just there like, but you're building a tech product. But you're building an AI tech product. How do you... But no one's technical. How? That's not possible. That's not right. This isn't ever going to work. The company's now doing quite well. And that was like a big turning point for me, because it was the moment of like, actually, they thoroughly understand the problem.
Right.
They understand the problem inside out. And that's worth its weight in gold. You can have the most amazing tech people, but unless you have a deep understanding of a problem space, of an industry, of a market, what's that worth? And that curiosity, I think as well, the willingness to be bad at something and to get things wrong is so incredibly valuable, and definitely I think what holds a lot of people back, because you're afraid of asking a silly question but realistically, by doing that sort of thing, there's probably lots of people sitting around you, and that's always the thing that's said of like, oh, if you've got the question, probably lots of people do. But actually, if you've got a question, you're brave enough to ask it, you're deepening your understanding in such a valuable way. And that's, that curiosity, I think, is an itch which I have to scratch.
I'm so glad that you said that, because to me, that just blows open the whole thing about a student having a degree and saying, right, well, I'm a computer scientist, I'm a chemist, I'm a mathematician. Yes, you have those skills and you've learned that theory and you've proven to be capable in that area. What are you going to do with that knowledge? How are you going to apply it to the world to help people, to create value, to move yourself forward to the places you want to be? That the degree, you need that, but then you need to understand a problem or care about something. Have that curiosity to be able to make the progress. Would you say that's true for you?
Yes. Well, your whole question is leading to an on-air confession. Okay. I have 2 tattoos, both in highly respectable places. The second of which was actually brought about by an Einstein quote that I found in my geekiest youth when I was at my hardest of hardcore science years. And he said something along the lines of, curiosity has its own reason for existing. And from a science perspective, that is, well, sometimes you actually can't see what the application of the science is, but there's a reason that you're pulling on that thread. You're bringing something into the world that wasn't there before. And it might be, if I can tie this to Kayla's point, it might be that you never see that. And it's then a non-technical person who happens to have studied a problem or spoken to lots of people in a particular domain that sees that you've got the missing piece of their puzzle.
Right.
So that's been with me since my earliest days, trying to build a career in science. But then when you go from that science-driven side of doing it for doing its sake, there is then the curiosity of, well, what comes afterward? Like, what are the problems out there that people have for which this thing might be useful one day? And that's the curiosity that goes beyond technology, and the curiosity of talking to people, living, breathing, flesh and bone human beings, to find out what's going on in the middle upstairs. And then that turns into figuring out, well, what's their day-to-day job? What's the pains of that day-to-day job? If they had something that solved those pains, like, what would they gain out of that? And that's talking in very specific language, because only many years later, after that tattoo, did I ever learn about things like value proposition canvases and business model canvases and things like that. And you learn these frameworks with which to be very productively curious as well.
Right.
But you can't ever let the curiosity go. It's not something that you should ever be guilty of. And that's something that I think, putting my parental hat on for a second, I need to keep in mind, is that, you're always trying to keep your kids safe. But sometimes that can sound like you're knocking curiosity out of them or telling them not to do something, but not always justifying why. So trying to maintain childlike curiosity is something that you want to keep for yourself, but it's also a responsibility that we as parents, as guardians, want to think very deeply about as well.
There was something you mentioned a minute ago, talking about being willing to ask the question as well, of that fear of, maybe this is a stupid question and someone's going to judge me for saying it, maybe I'm going to get this wrong. I think this idea for students, certainly I can relate to, is you come through school and it's about getting your grades, and you get your grades that enable you to come to university, and then it's about getting your grades to enable you to get the marks for that. And so being wrong is something you never really want to be, because that's not what you need to get you to the next stage, the next level, the thing you're trying to progress towards. So then having to maybe unlearn that fear of getting things wrong, and that idea that getting things wrong could be sometimes useful.
Yep.
For students who feel pulled towards something outside of their degree, who feel like they want to give something a go, but they're worried about being wrong, would you have any advice?
Go for it.
I'd actually like to be really aggressively dramatic about this.
Please do.
Which camera? This one. Get things wrong as fast as possible, as often as you can. That is how you learn. I am so passionate about that. You can do as many things well as you like, but it's only really whenever you start crossing boundaries where it's not easy, where it is really hard, and you will get things wrong, that you actually learn and dramatically grow. Like, there was definitely a little bit of guilt in my final year of uni, and this is going to be so unrelatable to a large portion of these viewers, and them, I'm sorry. But I did find my undergraduate degree relatively easy. Like, you just learned things and then threw them out, and that was kind of a formula as to how you answered exam questions and things like that. There was a way to do these things. It was the same way you did it in school, and that was straightforward. I had a really bad habit. I had a really, really bad habit. And that was, since I was used to applying these formulas, you learn the stuff. There's a certain way exam questions are asked, and this is how you answer in order to get the grades. I deliberately went out of my way, where I spent a year doing things I was bad at.
Right.
Because I had the terrible habit of, if I wasn't instantly good at it, if I couldn't magically learn things and pick them up really quickly, then I'd be like, I hate that, that's terrible, I've thrown it away. And that was just throwing away opportunities for growth. Like, if you're stopping at the hard stuff, then you're stopping at the good stuff. Get in there, get it wrong, make a mess of it, and then find out why it went wrong and why you made a mess of it and how you can avoid it next time. So I took it to its logical extreme. I started two businesses, one media production, one AI. In the same year, I learned to skateboard. I'm horrifically coordinated. And I knew I was going to be really bad at it, but I'd always kind of fancied it. So I gave it a go, and I broke an arm and I broke an ankle. But I had a really good time. And I learned a lot about how to be bad at things that I am so grateful for, because getting things wrong and doing things that are embarrassing or hard, that in itself is such a valuable skill. If it's not scary, is it really worth your time? You know, how much will you learn if you're not at least a bit afraid?
Sure. She says, feeling slightly afraid. Yes. Okay, take the point. Anything you'd like to add on this topic?
You said advice for leaning into new things and the unknown.
Yes.
There's a complementary but equally aggressive stance on this, which is nothing you will do is everything that you learned already. Your first job to your last will be you going in and maybe doing a little bit based on what you learned, a hell of a lot more on how that specific company does things, what their culture is, what their mission is, what drives them, people that you like to work with, people that you find horrendously difficult to work with. All of those things on the technical and emotional intelligence things are all going to be unknowns for every single job loop that comes. So the advice is more take it as the norm, not a shiny skill to develop. It's like, this is what you need now to survive in the modern workplace and thrive and experiment widely enough to find the thing that you want to stick at for more than a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a valuable conversation to have. I want to give you a chance to give maybe a couple of quick fire answers to people as well, so they can get the most value they can possibly get from you in this short time that we have you for. So, 2 quick questions. One thing students can do this week to open up their options, and one piece of advice you'd give your undergraduate self. In any order you want to approach this, one thing students can do this week to open up their options, and one piece of advice you would give your own undergraduate self.
Okay, opening up the options, double your failure rate.
Great.
Ooh.
Yep.
I'm going to start with the opposite question. What I would tell my younger self is don't ask for permission. Do not ask for permission, whether that is like from family or whether that is from yourself. Don't ask for permission to try new things and to fail. Go try it, get it out there, say nothing, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, so what? So what? But don't ask for permission to make that first step.
Brilliant. Advice for your undergraduate self?
I did write a letter about this once, in which, and I published it, I'll share it somewhere else. One of the things I wrote about in there was learn the concept of anti-fragility. Okay. So there's fragility, which is a glass will smash when you throw it on the floor. Resilience is a plastic glass that will not smash when you throw it on the floor. Anti-fragility is you throw it on the floor and it gets stronger as a result. So learning about the ways in which we as humans are uniquely positioned to get knocked down many, many times, but come back again stronger. So having the concept of anti-fragility in your head can itself be a quiet superpower.
I've never heard of anti-fragility until now, so thank you for that one. And one thing students can do this week to open up their options?
Do something embarrassing. And I don't mean get drunk on a night out. I mean, if you fancied writing a book, tell people you're an author. See if there's interest in the book and wherever you want it to go. Like, if you want to start a startup, then go out there, put yourself into a founders meetup and go, hi, I'm a founder and this is what I'm doing, and just see how it goes. Do something embarrassing, do something scary, and throw yourself into a new environment where you get to test what that feels like. It's only through testament that you actually get that hands-on experience.
Yes, yeah.
That has been wonderful. I think that's a great way to leave it. Here's what I hope that everyone will take away from today, and that is that your degree is not a map, it's a launchpad, and the world is changing far too fast for a linear career path to make much sense anymore. What matters is curiosity, courage, being willing to do something that might be a bit embarrassing, and to follow the doors that open, especially the ones that you might not have expected. Kayla and Marc show that you're definitely allowed to reinvent yourself, you're allowed to mix disciplines, and you're allowed to outgrow the assumptions people hold about you, and even the ones that you've held about yourself. So if this episode sparked an idea, please send it to a friend who's questioning what their degree can lead to, and remember that you definitely do not need permission to explore, you just need to make a start. Thanks once again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. And if you did find it useful, we'd love it if you could leave us a review wherever you listen. It really helps new audiences to find us. This is the last episode in our series, which has been designed to help students become more employable. And so if you haven't heard the last few episodes, I would really encourage you to listen in. Thanks for joining us.